here is the Tab S7 Plus. I've had this just over a month now. It's a really nice tablet. It's got a really nice display. It's probably the main reason you'd want it. I also wanted something to use as an occasional laptop, so I got the official keyboard cover with the kickstand. I'll get to that, I'll talk about it. But I think the main reason you would pick this over the S7 is the OLED display, and if you want a tablet that's a little bit larger. So I'll talk about this, I'll talk about all the ins and outs of it, what's good and what's not. This is a bit of a long review, but there were so many things I felt that I had to include in the video. So if you want to skip between things, the timeline along the bottom of the screen is labeled. You can click all the different sections and skip between them. Otherwise, if you want to watch it in order, let's get cracking. So let's start out with the basics. Let's talk about dimensions. So this device is 285 by 185 by 5.7 millimeters, and that's 0.2 millimeters thinner than the 2020 iPad Pros. The regular S7 is slightly thicker than those iPad Pros. This device weighs 575 grams, is a 12.4 inch display with a 16 by 10 aspect ratio. In terms of how much this device weighs and the size of the screen, in terms of screen area, it's about halfway between the two iPad Pros. It's an all aluminium build with a glass front, as you'd expect. Along the edges we have brushed aluminium, and we've got the power button here next to the volume up and down. The power button is the Bixby key. If you tap it, it locks the screen as usual, but if you want to bring up the power menu, you have to press the power button and the volume down, and you hold those, and then the power menu opens. Going further along the edge, we've got a microphone over here, and there's another microphone on the left edge over here. Also along the edges, we've got 4 speakers. We've got one there, and one there, and one there. Side firing speakers. We've also got the charging connector over here. This is a USB 3.2 Gen 1 connector, which means 5 gigabit per second of data transfer. They could have done Gen 2, which would be 10 gigabit per second, but they didn't. That's fine, it's not really an issue. The only thing I would say about ports is we've only got the one, there's no headphone jack. Since they removed the headphone jack, they could have at least added a second Type-C connector, but they didn't. The cameras are placed sensibly for a landscape device. So as you'd expect, you've got it in the corner over here on the back, and the front camera is along the center of the long edge at the top, where it should be, really. We've also got 2 ambient light sensors. There's one next to the camera here, and there's one down here. This helps with auto brightness because your hand might be covering one of the sensors, but it's very unlikely that you'll be covering both, so that helps the auto brightness. We've also got an SD card tray over here, which requires an ejector pin. That's included in the box. So this device uses the Snapdragon 865 Plus processor, and it's good that they've used the Snapdragon rather than fobbing us off in the UK and most of the world with the Exynos like they do with their phones. The Exynos is not as good as the Snapdragon, and what they do is most countries get the Exynos, and even though it's a weaker, less efficient processor, they charge you the same amount of money. But this time with the tablets, as they did with the previous tablets, they've just gone Snapdragon everywhere, so thank you Samsung. But the Snapdragon 865 Plus is just the best that was available to Samsung. It's not the best, period, which I have to mention. So the best, period, in this class of ultra-thin, light tablet and mobile device, the best processor there is by Apple. It's the A12Z. So that needs mentioning. And what you'll want to know then is, does it matter? So there are different things that the processor does. So one of the things you might have seen with the marketing is about Xbox game streaming. I'm not a console person at all. I don't use any of the Xbox stuff, but I appreciate that's going to be a significant selling point. So all you need there, even though the Apple processor is more powerful, it would make no difference. The first thing is Apple's rejected the game streaming for iOS. You probably know that. Apple's gatekeeping your experience. They won't let you play it because they probably want money from Microsoft for things they don't deserve to get money for. But they've blocked you out of using it on an iPad. which is the bottom line. So even with more processing power, you can't play it. But the processing power is not relevant. All that's going to be relevant to the game streaming is the quality of your internet connection, primarily latency, as long as you have a bit of bandwidth. They're not going to stream mega high bitrate stuff from Xbox game streaming. Mainly you'll want a low latency. So that's one of the main things. Another main thing is a decent decode chip, something from, I don't know, the last 5 years. It's not actually the processor itself that handles the streaming. You don't need a more powerful CPU core to get a good experience out of it. You have dedicated decode chips in the processor. So all you really need is a good decode chip from the last 5 or so years, and that'll be fine. There'll be no difference performance-wise for the game streaming between this and an iPad, if an iPad did support it. And the other thing you want is a good Wi-Fi chip, which this has. So that's just an example of where the processing power doesn't matter. Another example is for some of my use cases where I want to remote into my desktop, the power of the desktop is what matters there, not the power of the tablet. That said, I don't want to make it seem like the processing power of the tablet is not relevant. What you want primarily there is just a smooth experience, the ability to scroll smoothly and transition between things without waiting. I haven't opened OneNote since yesterday. It just came up like that immediately. OneNote stays in memory quite well. That's a different conversation. But it's a very fluid user experience, and that's primarily what you want, and you do get it with this. So the processor is fine, it's a good processor, but it needs to be said that Apple has a better one, and Samsung should be doing a better job to compete with that. And they are trying, they're just not very successful with it. So although I think overall performance is less of an issue on these types of tablets, I did want to do some quantitative performance testing, of course. So I went to 3D Mark and I did Slingshot, and I got an overall score of 8,700 points with a graphics score of 12,800 and a physics score of 4,100. And then I did Slingshot Extreme using OpenGL ES 3.1, and I got an overall score of 6,800 points, a graphics score of 8,600 points, and a physics score of 4,000 points. And then I did Slingshot Extreme Vulkan, which got me 6,300 points overall, a graphics score of 8,800, and a physics score of 3,100. And this shows that for some reason Vulkan does not run as well on here. It's probably some kind of driver issue, but there are your benchmarks that you can compare with other Android devices. In this device, I've got 6 gigs of memory, or RAM. Samsung's website is I think it's probably a translation issue. They list memory as storage, so it's got 128 gigs of memory. Technically incorrect. Memory is the RAM, storage is the storage. So it's got 6 gigs of memory. Most markets offer 8 gig variants as well, but in the UK they only offer 6 gig variants, so that's what I had to get. Is that an issue? Well, it's a difficult conversation because Android is, in my opinion, awful with memory management generally. It used to be good. Back on Android 8, I think it was fine, and then it started to go downhill. I think Google's doing some dodgy stuff. An issue I've seen with 6 gigs of memory on here is I tried Civilization 6 and you can't tab out, because if you tab out, by that I mean if you switch into another app, when you go back in Civilization will have unloaded from memory and it will have to restart, reload the entire app. You have to load your save again, you'll have lost anything that you didn't save, which is not good. You can use MultiStar, which we'll get to force Civilization to stay open, or to force any one app to stay open, which works. I don't know what Google's problem is, they're just awful with memory management. But that's that. I don't know if the 8 gig variant would help with that. I've never seen this 6 gig device go over 4.1 gigs of memory utilization, even with Civ 6 open. So I don't know why it forces the thing to unload. It just doesn't make any sense. I have a 6 gig phone as well, and again, I've never seen it above 4.1, so it just seems ridiculous. I don't know what's going on with that. I actually don't know if more memory would help, or if Android is just that dumb that it keeps unloading stuff for no reason. It's a sharp contrast to Windows, for instance, which doesn't have stupid problems like this. But even though it's got that stupid problem, Android, it's mostly fine. You can leave things like OneNote or Samsung Notes or Samsung Internet open and then go to sleep, put the device to sleep, come back tomorrow, click the app, and it opens because it's still in memory. But then there are things like Firefox where if you tab out and go away for a few minutes, you tab back in and the page has to reload. So it really depends on who the app was made by, and I guess if they've figured out how to deal with Android's memory management limitations. So what about battery life? Well, I've had AccuBattery installed for the month that I've had the device so far, and it reckons I can get almost 11 hours of screen on time, which is great, really. But that depends on how you use the device. Most things that I do are entirely in dark mode. I don't run any apps with this kind of theme, with the bright theme. Everything I run has a black background, like Samsung Internet dark mode, Firefox dark mode, dark reader. I use the developer setting that forces a lot of apps into dark mode, even if they don't support it, but can't force all of them there. If you use light themes, your battery life will be lower. By how much, I'm not sure. As well as what AccuBattery has reported, I've also done some video watching in the movies and TV app, and I projected that out to give me 12 to 12.5 hours of video playback at 25% brightness. The normal S7 has a fingerprint sensor that's on the power button, which is on the outside edge of the device, whereas this has an in-display fingerprint sensor, and whenever you turn on the display, you'll see the outline for where your print needs to go. And whenever you put your finger on it, it illuminates bright white, and that's how you know it's an optical sensor, whereas it could have been ultrasonic like the ones they use on the phones. I never personally used an ultrasonic one, so I can't really comment on how good or bad they are in relation to each other. That unlock was particularly slow. Usually it's faster like that, but it's less consistent than the normal fingerprint sensor that was on the Galaxy Book Flex. What I would have liked to see, in addition to a fingerprint sensor, is an iris scanner, like what's on my Note 9, which is recording this, but it does not have one. It has plenty of space for one, they just didn't put one in. It would be nice to have an additional unlock method, aside from the fingerprint sensor. And yes, I know Android has face unlock, but it's not secure face unlock, so I don't recommend using that. If you want something that's secure, you basically have the fingerprint sensor or your PIN or your passcode, and that's it. Those are your options. So iris scanner would have been nice. This device uses a very special display. It's very difficult to find something like this in any device. For me, there are 3 things I look for in a display. One of them is OLED, another is high refresh, and another is G-Sync, and it doesn't have G-Sync obviously, so let's forget about that one. But it's a high refresh OLED, which is really difficult to come by and has never been done before in a device in this product category. I think, at least from my perspective, when you put an OLED next to any kind of LCD or QLED or whatever, the OLED just puts the other device to shame with the vibrancy of its colors and its ability to actually display the color black, which other devices can't do. If you're not familiar with display technology, then let me give you a quick crash course. So most devices, including iPads and most iPhones, use LCDs, and most of Samsung's premium devices use OLEDs manufactured by Samsung Display. So this device uses an OLED, which is very desirable, and the colors are much more vibrant, they look much nicer. But for me, the main benefit is that this display can actually display the color black. And it might sound silly, it might say, well, my device can display black, my LCD, it can't, it displays grey. LCDs are backlit, and that means there's a light behind the display, but inside the device, that shines through the pixels to provide light to your eyes. Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to see the LCD very well. And if you're from my generation, you might have had a Game Boy when you were younger, had a backlight that you could switch on, and if you didn't switch it on, you couldn't really see the display that well. So it was optional back then, but we have higher quality displays now. We expect better lighting conditions, so we always have a backlit display for LCDs, but the backlight covers the whole display. So what that means is anything that's displayed on the display gets polluted by that light. So if you want to display a bright color like green, it's fine, but if you want to display black, the backlight provides light to your black, polluting it and turning it into grey. On OLEDs, each pixel provides its own light, and each pixel can be individually switched off. With no backlight behind it to pollute any of the light coming from the pixels, and the ability to switch off an individual pixel, we can create the color black. Because the color black is not really a color, it's just the absence of light. So with no backlight behind, shining through, and with the ability to switch off an individual pixel, that individual pixel can produce no light at all, thereby producing the color black, and it looks very clean. My primary appreciation of the black levels is for dark mode, where I use every app at every time of day, with preferably a black background, or I can settle for a grey one. OLEDs help with that. But outside of that, they help with general use as well, because any two colors where one involves black, you have an infinite contrast ratio between them, which can help the display to look more pleasing, help things to stand out more. And in movies and TV shows with dark content, characters can appear to have depth as they come into the darkness and out of the darkness, and that's a really nice effect that the OLED brings to your media consumption. And people will really love this display for consuming media. The display is unfortunately not perfect. It does have a green tinting issue, and this seems to vary between units, so it looks like there's some kind of quality control issue. My green tint is not that bad. It's barely visible at 0% brightness, and then if you go the tiniest bit above 0%, it's pretty visible, and then it's kind of in and out of visible up until about 10%, and then it pretty much goes, and very much goes after 15. So that's a drawback. We have heard about these kinds of issues before. There was one with the S20, I think, which they fixed with an update, but if you get one of these devices and you have a green tint, you need to be happy with it now, because there's no guarantee that they will fix it. So that's a downside there. Another issue related to the display is that the touch digitizer is too sensitive. What that means is you can take your finger, you can bring it very close to the display, and you can actually scroll and touch things accidentally without touching the display. That's because the touch digitizer is too sensitive. That's something they could fix with software, but I don't know that they will. We've got 4 speakers on here. What are they like? I'll try to get that across through my phone's microphone. It's loud, but as well as being loud, it's pretty clear. The Galaxy Book Flex that I had previously had side-firing speakers as well, like these are, but it had 2 of them, although those 2 were bigger and didn't go nearly this loud, didn't sound nearly as clear. This has much better sound than that laptop. The sound is great. I don't think anyone will be disappointed with it. So here is the front-facing camera, and here's what the microphones sound like. We've got all the video stuff on here. We've got Pro Video, we've got Pro Photo, there's all the single take, all that stuff. All the good stuff's on here. Camera's pretty decent. It's not incredible. Better than you'll find on most laptops. Here we are with the wide-angle rear camera in roughly the same orientation. And here is the regular rear camera in roughly the same orientation. So let's talk a little bit about the pen experience. This was a main use case for me. So the digitizer, there's one for touch and there's another one for pen. And the pen digitizer technology is the same as is used in all the other Samsung tablets, phones and laptops, and even some devices from other manufacturers. It's based on something called Wacom EMR, which is an artist grade pen technology. And you can use the pen from your Note, or you can use the one that comes with the device. The pen supports 4096 pressure levels with tilt, same as the pen from the phone, same as many other EMR pens. There's a separate strand of EMR supporting 8192 pressure levels, which is what you find on Cintiq's and Intuos devices. Those pens are not compatible with this. There's a barrier. There's Cintiq and Intuos technology for EMR, and then there's S Pen and everything else for EMR, which is interchangeable. So the pen that comes with it, I like it. It's got a nice rubberized feel. It's slightly rubberized, it's not really rubber. I think it's nice, it gives you a little bit of grip on the pen, and the pen tip itself is also quite rubbery, which helps you to get a nice grip on the screen when you're writing, as opposed to a hard plastic pen tip on a smooth glass screen, like with the old Surface Pros and like with the new iPads, which I've always found that more difficult to write with because you just can't get enough grip, and I feel like that made my handwriting bad, but that's a preference thing. You can get a screen protector like a paper-like one, but that's going to affect your display quality, and it would be a real shame to do that when the display is as good as this one. It would be, you just don't want to do that. It will affect the colors, it will affect the display quality. But the pen that comes with it works really well. You can get other ones like the Norris Digital, which I have, works perfectly. There are a lot of other EMR pens you can get. So the pen sits on the back there. It's not really difficult to put there, although I have seen people complain that it is. I'm doing it now with not much difficulty. If you spend time with the device, I don't think it's difficult to do. MKBHD said it's difficult to place there, but he probably only got his Galaxy Tab out to review it and is back to using his iPad, so he didn't learn the placement and stuff. But it's not very difficult, really. And if you don't want to put it on the back there, you can also put it there. And putting it here, you might say, well, Liam, doesn't the pen need to charge back here on its wireless charger? Well, not really. If you let the pen go completely dead, it will still write and draw perfectly. The only thing it won't do is the Bluetooth gestures. This pen and the pen technology does not require any power inside the pen for writing and drawing. It leaches that power from the display using the magnetic field that is used to track the pen in close proximity. So it does not need the charge to write or draw, unlike an Apple Pencil, which will not function if you don't charge it. So if you don't want the air gestures, you can put it there and it's fine. Additionally, it sticks to many points of the back. You can see it sticking kind of lightly and then it sticks well. There are places you can just kind of chuck it to use the tablet in portrait. So you've got a few different places you can put it, and there's just the one where it charges. One of the things that Samsung has advertised with this device is the improved pen latency, and the pen latency is not tied to the pen itself, so you can't just buy the new pen and bring that back to your old device. The pen latency is a feature of the device itself, and it's really good. So just to show you quickly, if you pause this at any point in time, you will not see a gap between the line and the pen tip. That's how well it keeps up, specifically in Samsung Notes. And in the case of Samsung Notes, it's almost entirely due to the prediction software that they're now using in Samsung Notes version 4. And in fact, if you get this app on another device, like an older Galaxy Tab or an older Galaxy Note, you will get most of that latency benefit on your older device, specifically for this app. But aside from Samsung Notes, the latency has been improved system-wide. Apps like OneNote respond much faster to the pen, which is very nice to see. So what's the pen like to write with or draw with? What's the experience like? One of the things that some people complain about when they use an EMR device is the palm rejection, because there kind of isn't any. How it works is you bring the pen close to the display and it will be detected before it touches the display. This is called the hover range. The Apple Pencil does not have a hover range, it's only detected when it touches the screen. But EMR and even other types of pen technology like N-Trig or Microsoft Pen Protocol, as it's called now, which isn't a very good one, they have a hover range, so they're detected above the screen. This is useful for things like if you're in Samsung Internet and there's a link on the page, you can hover the pen over it to see where the link takes you. You can peek things in the OS, stuff like that. It's pretty useful. But when within hover range, most pen apps will decide to reject touch input, and that's your palm rejection. So your primary concern is making sure that the pen enters hover range before your palm meets the screen. That's your palm rejection. There isn't really much more intelligence to it than that. And the hover distance that you get with this particular digitizer is less than with other EMR digitizers that I've used, which is makes it slightly more difficult to get good palm rejection. So that's something to be aware of. It's something that you'll have to try and see if it works for you. I do have occasional issues with it in OneNote, but in Samsung Notes, I think they might actually have some actual palm rejection in there as well as just the let's reject touch when the pen is in hover range. We've also got screen off memos on here, part of Samsung Notes. If you lock the device, then you take the pen and you hold the side button, double tap the screen off note will open. Now you can note take in here, and then you can lock the device again with the power button, and then you can turn the display back on and your note will stay there so you can keep coming back to it. And when you're done, you can save it. So we've also got air gestures on here, and the pen battery should last more than a day, so you can use it as a movie remote or whatever, play and pause videos. That's a cool use for it. A lot of the other uses you might not use that often, but Clip Studio Paint, for instance, allows you to bind 8 different gestures to shortcuts within the app, which can really help you to be productive. So if you spend a lot of time with a given app that supports them, it can be worthwhile learning the gestures. But something I've done through the OS is, for instance, there's this gesture, which I've bound to the magnifier, which is now opened. The magnifier works with the pen hover. So you hover over the screen and it magnifies things. And you can change the magnification between 150 and 300% in 50% increments. That's pretty cool. I've also done Smart Select like this, and these work pretty reliably. So Smart Select is open now. I can make my selection, I can edit it, whatever. I've also got Screen Write, which is this scribble gesture. Now it's taken a big screenshot and I can do my screen write. One of the best things about Samsung's phones and tablets is an application called GoodLock, which is developed by Samsung, but it's not preloaded. You install it yourself from Galaxy Apps, or the Galaxy Store as they seem to call it now. I'm not sure when that name changed, but this is, other people review Samsung products and I've not seen a single one of them mention GoodLock, and that's criminal because GoodLock is a system seller. It's that good. It adds a ton of functionality to your device, making it much nicer to use. Multi-window is much better thanks to GoodLock. Gestures, much better thanks to GoodLock. General customization, much better thanks to GoodLock. Some apps only work in portrait. GoodLock fixes that, makes them work in landscape. There's a ton of great stuff in here that you can do, and you really need to get GoodLock. Unfortunately, GoodLock is not available in all regions. I'm in the UK where it works. It also works in Germany, the US and Korea, just off the top of my head. There are more regions than that. If GoodLock is not showing for you in the Galaxy Store, then Google NiceLock and look into that. You might be able to get it that way. If you go into GoodLock, there are a bunch of modules that you can install. When you click these for the first time, it takes you to the Galaxy Store. where you can install them, and there's just so much you can do. You can customize your lock screen, you can customize your quick panel and do things like, for instance, I've got the clock in the middle at the top there, if you can see that, which it used to default to there, but after Google knocked off Apple's notch and made an even bigger notch, they said, okay, nothing in the middle of the status bar anymore, everything has to be on the sides. But QuickStar allows you to add and remove all the different status bar icons, like the Wi-Fi strength, the 4G, 5G strength, all that sort of stuff. You can choose to hide it all if you want. You can move the clock to whatever position you want it in, as in left, right, or center, or not show it at all. Task Changer is another useful module that allows you to customize the Recents menu. You can choose really big icons to scroll through, or you can choose much smaller ones to make it more compact, even going all the way down to not showing any icons at all, and just having a vertical list of written application names to scroll through. And while you're scrolling through things, you can select the animation. This is the rotation up animation, and there are a bunch of others you can choose. You can decide whether or not to blur the background so you can make it feel like yours. Home Up adds a few convenience features, like on the apps screen you can't scroll through from the last screen back to the first screen, but if you enable this loop pages setting, you can go straight from the last screen back to the first. There's also the ability to hide the application names on your home screen so that you've only got icons, and you can change the grid size to make all the icons smaller so you can fit more in. Then you can move those about however you like. You can also change the folder style. For instance, the folder is typically a full screen thing, and in there you've got a grid like the home screen. You can change the size of that grid. You can also make it not a full screen folder so that it just pops up and pops away again. You can change the background color, the font color. That's pretty cool. For any fans of the traditional 3-button navigation, you've got NavStar. First you have to enable the traditional 3-button navigation. Then if you come into NavStar and enable it, you can customize your navigation bar along the bottom of the screen. You can change the button alignment. However, if you add more than 3 buttons, it clips them off the screen. It doesn't work. But if you just leave it at default and add more buttons, you can add media keys, you can add screen capture, camera shortcut, but you can only add 2 extra buttons, so it's 5 in total. You've got the media keys there. You can change the transparency. You can change the button icons, although when I changed the icon for the camera, when I added that as a test, I couldn't actually find the camera icon to change it back to, so be careful with that. You can change the button transparency, and when you're done, you've got your new nav bar. You can press the keys, they work, and that's pretty cool for people who are into that navigation style. There's tons of stuff you can do here. We've got MultiStar, which forces portrait apps to work in landscape. It can keep an app from being killed by the stupid memory management that Android has. You can permit all apps to work in multi-window, because with stock Android they don't all work with multi-window and split screen, and I don't think stock Android even has windowing, but you can make them all work with that on here, just enabling that toggle. And there's a disclaimer that says it might not work for all apps, but it does. I have never found one that it doesn't work for. They've had that for years, and no one's ever been mentioning it, and it's so useful. And MultiStar has this pop-up view action, which allows you to do this, to just window any app that you've got open in full screen like that. It's so good. It's so useful. You've got Pentastic, which I wish they would have added a global pressure curve to this app, but they didn't. That's what I wanted from Pentastic. I hope they'll still do that. But you can customize your air command menu to make it look however you want it to. And to get that open, you're going to have to take the pen off. But once you take off the pen, you've got this icon here. And you can change how this appears. So you've got the stock one, which is like this. And then it's a full screen thing. You've got radial, like that, which you can scroll around, and that's really cool. I think it used to function like that at one point. Then you've got the compact one, which I'm using, which is nice like that. And there are a bunch of options. If you use the on-screen hover pointer, you can change it to customize how it looks. You can even use a custom image, right? You've got sound effects when you attach and remove the pen. You can customize those. You can even use your own sound effect. You've got one-hand operation plus, which adds a load of edge gestures. You can swipe in from the edges, which is really nice because that's where your hands rest. When you're holding the tablet, you've got a hand on either side. Apple's got a gesture bar at the bottom, which Google copied, and no one holds their tablet from the bottom. No one holds their phone from the bottom. You hold it from the sides. So one hand operation plus allows you to gesture from the sides to do a bunch of things, and I use it all the time. It's really improved the way that I use my phone and now my tablet. This is probably my favorite app from Good Luck. So on the left and right hand side of the screen, you can see these swipe zones. You can make those bigger, smaller, you can make them visible through the OS, but I hide them because I'm used to the gestures. Keep them visible while you learn, and then you can hide them. You've got advanced settings in here to change whether or not the S Pen can activate the gestures, and you can select which apps you don't want the gestures to apply to if you find that they're conflicting with anything. I don't tend to have those types of issues. But on the left and right handles, you can set different gestures. So you can have up to 12 different gestures in total, because you get 6 on each side, although I find it easier to have both of them the same. So the way it works is you've got short swipes and long swipes, and here you can see if I do a long swipe left, that goes to my previous app. So if I do that now, it takes me to Good Luck, where it just came from. And if I do it again, it takes me back to one-hand operation plus. And if I do it again, same thing. It's basically Alt-Tab, right? And if I do a short swipe diagonally down, that's my home key. So if I do that now, it takes me home. Then I can tab back into the app I just came from. And if I do a long swipe diagonally up, I've got my quick tools. So when you click any of these, you can view all of the actions you can put to any one gesture. You can do the back key, the home key, volume keys, go to the app screen, forward in the web browser, open the quick panel, turn off the screen, turn on the torch, screenshot. Then you've got a few things down here that you can customize. So the quick tools, you can add and remove different things from that panel. And then you've also got Sound Assistant, which gives you a global equalizer, so you can equalize your volume across the entire operating system. You can play sound from multiple apps at the same time. You can mute sound from specific apps. You can direct sound from specific apps to specific output devices. So there's a lot of stuff you can do here, a lot of stuff with Good Luck, and make sure you check it out if you get a Samsung device. To open apps in split screen, open an app normally in full screen and then open the Apps Edge. At the top we have suggested apps. You can add shortcuts to your favorite apps, or through the grid icon at the bottom you can access the apps list. Drag an app from here and then to the right, top, left or bottom of the screen to split it, or drag to the center to window the new app. Drag the bar in the middle to resize the apps. Tap it and select the center icon to swap sides, or select the left icon to change between horizontal and vertical split. We can split with a third app in a similar way. Open the Apps Edge and drag the icon. We can split again with the right side but not the left, or if we had apps on the top and bottom, we could only split again with the top one. To save our 3 apps as a group, touch the divider and select the rightmost button. This goes into the Apps Edge and we can click it at any time to open the same 3 apps. This particular combination is very slow to open. I found Firefox causes this. This is not normal behavior, but I wanted to leave it in. Note also that exact app sizing is not preserved. Here's another example that opens at the normal speed. It opens the book I was reading when I made the split, but this is only because the app was still open. If Lithium had been closed, it would not remember the book I was reading when I made the split. At the time I recorded this audio, Lithium had remained loaded in memory for 4 days without use, which is pretty good. With the pop-up gesture enabled in MultiStar, you can window your app by dragging diagonally down from one of the top corners.
You can also split the screen by clicking the blue bar at the top of the window and then the leftmost icon. The built-in calculator is a bit basic for me, as I like a full scientific calculator. The problem is that these apps don't make much sense in full screen, and they aren't always convenient to use in split screen either, so windowing the app is perfect for these situations. If you play videos from Samsung Internet, you can use the built-in video assistant to better handle your videos. The assistant provides all of the gestures and controls from Samsung Video. If you switch apps, the video will pop out into its own small window and can be moved around the screen. You could take notes with this video floating on the side. We could instead full screen the video and whilst holding the pen button, double tap the screen. This opens Samsung Notes in a window. We can move this window around and alter its transparency. If you then type, you get a transparent keyboard so that you can still see the video. We can also write with the pen. This is a powerful feature enabling us to take notes over full-screen videos. Another good way to take notes while watching a video is in portrait mode with the video on top. No matter how many splits we have, we can always add more windows.
So let's talk a bit about the keyboard cover. This is something that I thought would be an essential accessory. It's built to look leather-like, but it's a plastic. I hope it won't fall to pieces like a lot of cheap leather knockoffs do, but we'll see how that goes. It's attached now. The easiest way to remove it is to lift this flap, push down on the tablet and lift this up, and then it'll come off. The easiest way to install it is to use this flap as a guide to get it in place. It's very easy, and then you can just drop it on and it stays attached really well. You can open the kickstand and lift the thing up, shake it, and it will stay attached to the tablet. While you've got the kickstand open, you can change it to many different angles. That's as deep as it goes, and then you can take it all the way back. The hinge is suitably stiff. It's very impressive, really. I thought the hinge would be worse, but it's actually really good. So using this as a guide, that's the easiest way to do it. But if you just line it up mostly, you can drop it on like that. You can hear it clicking in. That works pretty well. When it's installed, you've of course got this flap here to protect the pen, which is nice so it doesn't get knocked off of the tablet. It's nice and safe in there. You've got this cutout here for the camera on the back. That's nice. I think with these types of cases, there are two types of people that will use them. There are people who will case it up like this and keep the thing on permanently. And then there are people who, when they want to hold the tablet, they will take this off. They will take this off and enjoy the thinness and lightness of the tablet. And I'm one of those people. So for me, it was essential that this had been upgraded to attach and detach really easily so that I can do that. And with the S6, there was a problem with it because the kickstand did not attach magnetically. It was only this part that was magnetic, and then the middle part had some weird suction thing that would fall off if it got dusty. And for people in the first category who would keep it installed permanently, it comes out of the box clean, you can put it on, and apparently it would stay there. But if you were more like me and you wanted to remove it, the suction cup would get dusty and then it wouldn't stick and the tablet would fall off of it. But now that it's a full magnetic plate, it just always goes on, it always stays there, it always has a really good connection, so you can take it off, reinstall it as needed, and it always holds perfectly, which is a really nice improvement. And when you've got it installed, it just makes your tablet much easier to use. If you've ever had a Surface Pro, then you'll appreciate the qualities of having a kickstand. There's no compromise with the angle. If you have a normal kind of case, something like the Magic Keyboard from Apple has very limited adjustment angles. You can't really put it in many angles. Or some kind of case like the regular book cover, which I think has 3 angles that it snaps to. You're always compromising. But with something like this, You can put it basically vertical, and you can hold it any angle you choose, all the way down to here, which is nice for writing on. So you get a lot of freedom there, and it really improves the way that you use your tablet. Samsung only sells it with this keyboard. They seem to think it's a package deal, and why would you use a kickstand without the keyboard? But I disagree with that. I think you can use the kickstand all the time to hold this thing up. If you're reading something, if you're watching a movie and you don't want to hold the tablet, you just want to put it down, you can use the kickstand and get a perfect angle. So really, they should probably sell the kickstand separately, or better yet, include it for free. When you want to attach the keyboard, the magnets are not quite as good as what's on the back. In fact, none of the magnets are as good as what's on the back. It's a complicated thing because the pen is tracked using a magnetic field, which is emitted from a digitizer behind the display. So if you add more magnets, you're going to create interference if you're not careful, and then the pen experience is going to degrade. So I think that's why the kickstand cover for the S6 didn't hold on magnetically, but they figured that out now. And the magnets here, they work fine. You just have to be a bit more careful aligning them than you would if you were using a Surface Pro. So you align it, it clicks in, and that's fine, but you just have to make sure to align it. So you get your keyboard attached, and it's all plastic, which is fine. It's even the touchpad is plastic, and all the keys are plastic, but the keys are good. They have deep travel. They have a lot deeper travel than you would expect, which is really nice. I'm pleasantly surprised by how far the keys go down. They have a really pleasant feel to them, and the feel of the keyboard I'm really happy with. It's great for typing on. I went straight from my desktop K70 to this, typing with no issues, just straight to it, no learning curve. I think the spacing is really good. I think the travel is really good, even for a laptop. I think the travel is deeper than what was on the Galaxy Book Flex by a bit. It's really nice. On the S7 Plus keyboard, you've got the full function row. S7 keyboard does not have that. But we've got an escape key, we've got a delete key, we've got a dex key. The keyboard has a few spaces on it, which will meet the display before the keyboard does, which should help prevent any kind of scratchy movements, which is nice. In addition to that, when the device is on and you close the keyboard, it locks, which is nice. Although this does hold shut, but you might be able to see that it does slide a bit because the magnets on the front are not very strong. So that's properly closed, and then you let go and it drops a bit, and you can shift it. The way that it holds shut is a bit weak, but it's not really an issue. The only things I would personally complain about with this keyboard are the fact that it is not backlit, which is fine for me really, but it should be backlit, especially at this price point, £220. The plastic touchpad is not a massive deal, but it's not as good as a glass one. It does work, it'll work fine, you'll be fine with it, but it's not as good as a glass one. And I swear there is more cursor lag than you would get in Windows. I feel like that's a software thing. I think Samsung is just trying to be clever here, or Google, I don't know who's doing it. I think they're trying to animate the cursor position to make it appear more smooth to some people, but what they're really doing is introducing input lag, and there are no settings for that. It's not just acceleration, acceleration's fine on a touchpad, but I think they're just trying to ease it in and out as it moves, and that makes it feel a bit less responsive than it should. The touchpad software experience is very inconsistent. For example, the right click pretty much never does what you want it to do. It usually just acts as a back button. If you thought that you'd be able to right click icons on the home screen to bring up the long press context menu, nope, that doesn't work. The left click and drag pretty much never selects text, although it does work in Samsung Notes, so it is app dependent. You're pretty much better off using the touch screen instead of the touchpad in a lot of situations. Although selecting text is very inconsistent using the touchpad, you can use shortcuts like Control and the arrow keys to jump words most of the time. You can use the arrow keys to go between letters, and if you hold Shift while you're using the arrow keys and or Control, you can select the text. Copy and paste, you've got Control C, Control V, Control A. You can even use Control on the on-screen keyboard with Control A, Control C, Control V, Control Z, Control X, and they do the things you would expect. So let's talk a bit about DeX. What I've done here is I've opened Samsung Internet, I've gone onto CodePen, I've picked a random pen, and I've just changed this bit here to red. It was all black, right? So now I'm going to use the keyboard, press Function DeX to go to DeX mode, and let's see what happens. So DeX loads, takes a few seconds, doesn't take that long, but here we are in DeX. Let's open up Samsung Internet, and the page refreshed. In fact, the whole application closed and restarted and lost our changes. This is my first complaint about DeX. It's not a seamless experience at all. In fact, it has many seams in it. If you want to attach your keyboard and then say, oh, I'll just work in DeX now, I'll pick up where I left off in DeX mode, well, you're going to lose everything unless you save it. And it's not intelligent enough to warn you of this. It doesn't say, hey, there are changes you've made in the browser, let's not refresh everything right now. It just does it and loses everything. And what's weird about that is if I just make a small change here by not changing anything, just so that the site knows I've changed something, and then I go to refresh the page, it tells me that there are unsaved changes. Yet even though it knows that, it will let me go into DeX and lose them all. So, why use DeX? Well, DeX, I can see, has some benefit on an external display. If you want to project this device to something else, then you get all this as an independent interface on your TV or whatever, and you can use the tablet separately. That's cool. But in terms of using it on the tablet, well, let's just go back to Samsung Internet. And here we've got the app windowed, but we could window the app anyway. You just drag down from the corner, then you can window it, and you can move it around, and you can have multiple windows like you've got here. Only these windows have no transparency option. You can't minimize them to floating heads, which is fine. You've got a taskbar to go on there, okay. But now let's say we want to split the screen. So I'll take this one, and like Windows, you can take the app, drag it to the side, and it will fill up that half, which is good. Like Windows, that's great. Now let's take our second app. Why don't we choose Firefox, which also had to refresh from entering DeX. So great, we've got an app on the left, we've got an app on the right. Now let's resize them. So just like Windows, we go to the bar in the middle, and then we change the size, and oh look, we've got a gap in the middle because the left one did not resize to fill the empty space from shrinking the right one. And if we did this outside of DeX, we had split screen like that, and we dragged the bar in the middle, they would both resize. But for here, for some reason, they don't. It seems like unfinished software. It's basically how I would describe it. I don't see any reason why you would even go into DeX on this device unless you are projecting it to something else. There I see it has value, but here, if you connect the keyboard, just keep using the normal tablet interface. The keyboard works just as well. Your apps don't have to refresh. It works in portrait. This doesn't work in portrait. You do that, it doesn't do anything, it stays in landscape. No portrait support. The multi-window experience isn't as good. You've got no transparency. The apps don't resize properly. Just seems a bit silly. So that's basically my summary of DeX, which is why bother. I've used it on my phone with an external display, and that's good. That's good because you can use your phone independently of the external display, which is great. It's a great feature for projecting things, for hooking up a secondary display, which is a powerful thing that you can do. But in terms of running DeX directly on the tablet or the phone, I just don't see what benefit it brings. So having seen what I think to DeX running directly on the tablet, is there any use to the keyboard? And yeah, just use the normal tablet interface and do your typing there. I've done a lot of typing for the written version of this review into the browser using this keyboard, and it works great. I think it's an expensive purchase at £220, but it does do the job. It does work really well. There's nothing wrong with using the keyboard in the regular tablet interface, so I'd say just stick to that. The tablet experience itself without the keyboard is great, and some people complain that there's a lack of some types of apps, or some apps aren't tablet optimized. I don't use that many different apps. I mainly use the Samsung apps like Samsung Music, Samsung Video, Samsung Internet. I use Firefox, which needs some tablet improvements. It works, it's just the interface is not designed for a tablet. We'll see what happens with that. OneNote, Samsung Notes work great on tablets. Apparently Instagram doesn't work well. I don't use anything Facebook, so I wouldn't really know. But the tablet experience itself is great. You can open PDFs, edit them. Zodo's great for that. Samsung Notes is great for that. Note Take, OneNote, Samsung Notes. Reading is fantastic. I spend hours reading, both for educational reasons and for leisure, and it works great. I read comics on here, typically in portrait. They're great. The colors are great. The display is great. The device itself is really light, really easy to hold. It's a great tablet, really. Some people say that iPads are better for productivity work, and it depends what you mean by that. Typically what they mean is art productivity, and on an iPad you have more apps fit for that purpose. For instance, Adobe has a stronger focus on iOS, and there's an app called Procreate which looks great for the tablet experience. We have Clip Studio Paint now on here, which seems to do everything Procreate does and more, as I understand it, but the interface is very desktop. It's not a tablet interface, and people will probably have more enjoyment with a tablet optimized interface like Procreate. So there are strengths there, and I think there are more apps for touching up photos and editing videos. Not something I would do on a tablet. I would use my desktop, CUDA acceleration, all that. But if that's what you want to do on your tablet, then be aware of that. iPads have more in the artistry focused area. Hopefully that will be, it is changing, so there you go. But that's how it is at the moment. In terms of the other things that I do with it, note taking is probably, I don't think you could really give the advantage to one side over the other until you bring the display in. There's nothing like an OLED. It just makes everything nicer. Note taking, reading, watching movies, TV shows. I read a lot in Firefox with Dark Reader. Dark Reader for Firefox on Android is kind of in a preview mode, and they've got some new features so that you can actually theme Dark Reader, so you can give it an actual black background, which I really like for reading things. So the OLED is great. The OLED really benefits everything else. So just on top of the good pen technology, you've got the OLED, and on top of the 120Hz refresh rate, which makes everything so smooth, you've again got the OLED popping tons of vibrancy into the images and the incredible, perfect black levels, which make everything work really nicely. So art focused work, probably want an iPad. Anything else, I think this is pretty much better just because of the OLED. Everything you do with the device, you're looking at the display. Aside from listening to things, and the speakers are surprisingly really good. So if the OLED doesn't bother you that much, then it will just come down to, do you prefer iOS ecosystem or an Android or Samsung ecosystem? And then you make your decision based on that. The tablet's built really well. It has some pretty great accessories. The pen's great, the display is fantastic. If you like this ecosystem, then it's ready to do what you need it to do. So I hope you found that helpful. If you've got any questions, you can leave a comment in the video description, or you can use the contact form on my website. Check out the full written review if you want to see a few more things, and thanks for watching.